Hi, everyone. I'm Dan Jones. Welcome again to interCHANGE. Interesting stuff to talk about today. Is the governor's race getting closer than most of us realize? We'll talk about the possibility of Harley-Davidson moving production out of Milwaukee. We'll talk about the continuing controversy over research involving embryonic stem cells, and we'll discuss whether baseball commissioner Bud Selig deserves a statue outside of the taxpayer-funded Miller Park. Joining us today, our newspaper columnist Joel McNally. Kevin Fischer, aide to Republican State Senator Mary Lozick, and oftentimes a host over at WISN Radio. Denise Callaway, she's the communications director for the Greater Milwaukee Foundation. And Gerard Randall, well-known consultant and local job creation expert. Rick Horowitz will be along with commentary at the end of the show. All right, the first thing we'll talk about is the governor's race. The latest Rasmussen poll released today actually shows Mark Neumann doing better than Scott Walker in a matchup against Tom Barrett. I have two questions. Why has the media pretty much already christened Scott Walker as the Republican nominee? And will all these front page articles in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel about the problems at the mental health center here in Milwaukee hurt Scott Walker? Kevin, what do you think?
All right, first question. There's still a primary. I think the conventional wisdom is, and I believe that it's over on the Republican side, that Scott Walker will win the primary and will win it rather handily. Mark Neumann's not a quitter. He's not going to get out. He's stuck in it this long. He's stuck a lot of money in. And of course, he still has a chance. I don't think much of a chance, but he still has a chance. So yes, Mark Neumann is still in the race, although the Weekly Standard, a fabulous conservative magazine, had an outstanding lengthy piece this week on Scott Walker and his race for governor. It was page after page after page written by Stephen Hayes, former Milwaukeean and an accomplished writer, and not one time does it mention the name Mark Neumann. Don't you think that if you're talking about a primary between two Republicans and the focus is all on Scott Walker, that you would find somewhere in the article to at least mention Mark Neumann? Now, the second question, the Milwaukee County Mental Health Complex and the possible impact on Scott Walker. The Journal-Sentinel is out to assassinate Scott Walker's candidacy. Now, there are problems over the Milwaukee County Mental Health Complex, and they are being addressed, maybe not as quickly and as seriously as some would hope. But will it have an impact on Scott Walker's run for governor? I really don't think so. I think this is a temporary, minor glitch, a blip. The big issues are jobs and the economy, and I don't think statewide this really will resonate and hurt Scott Walker's candidacy.
Denise, on the mental health thing, I agree with Kevin. I think it's a very good story. It's an important story. But it's big in Milwaukee, and I don't think it's big in the rest of the state.
Well, I think you're right with that, because it is a very big story locally. Quite frankly, I don't know that we're paying as much attention to it as we need to. These are individuals who are the most vulnerable people in society. There are some terrible things that have happened to people there, and at the end of the day, someone's got to be held accountable for those. But I'm going to disagree with a little bit with Kevin on what's going on with Mark Neumann. I do think that Neumann is playing better outside of southeastern Wisconsin and the rest of the state than perhaps we're giving him credit for doing. Mark Neumann is a very smart guy. He does have a lot of money. He's sunk a lot of his own money into this campaign, and because it's his own money, I don't think that he would be going as far as he is with this if he did not believe that there was a good chance that he could end up being the Republican nominee for governor. Upstate, what Mark Neumann is saying is really resonating with Republican voters. It's also resonating with some independent voters. So I think it's kind of easy for us, because we're so caught up in what's happening here in southeastern Wisconsin, to say, well, this is going to be Walker. I think Neumann is going to give him a really good run for his money, and I think it's going to be a really interesting election night. If he can get out that vote in the northern part of the state, if he can mobilize those people to get out to vote for him, I think he's in pretty good shape. The interesting thing is, if you've been listening to his commercials lately, excuse me, he says, "Hi, I'm Mark Neumann, a conservative running for governor." He's taken himself out of that realm of being a Republican who's running for governor. He calls himself a conservative.
Former congressman.
Correct, but it's even interesting how he's referred to himself in that aspect. He's really trying to play up on this conservative piece that is resonating so strongly with so many voters, including across the Republican line. So I think he's going to make it. He's made it a very interesting race. I think we better hold on to our seats for the next couple of weeks.
But early on, he didn't play nice, and I think that hurt.
He hurt himself. He's not
He
nice.
hurt himself
And
with the base.
But people don't remember that.
Strategy that he went so negative and even, I would say, lied about Scott Walker, and that has hurt his credibility with the Republican base that goes out and votes in the primary.
You know, granted he has a big ego, but you don't put millions of dollars into a race just because you have a big ego. He must think there's a good chance he's going to win this.
And the interesting thing about what Kevin said about the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel trying to assassinate Scott Walker, the reason we think this race is over is all the puff pieces that the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel has written about Scott Walker and writing off Mark Neumann as his fringe candidate. And you know, they clearly have, every bad thing that has happened in Milwaukee County, whether it's, you know, huge pieces of concrete falling down and killing children, or you know, what's going on at the mental health complex, the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel rushes to, you know, try to pretend that Scott Walker's got nothing to do with this, and it would be wrong to bring this up in a campaign. The truth of the matter is, and I've said this from the very beginning, a mayor from Milwaukee will have a very hard time getting elected governor of Wisconsin, except against a county executive from Milwaukee. You know, Mark Neumann has all of the anti-Milwaukee, anti-Barrett, and anti-Scott Walker representing Milwaukee County, going for him in all the rest of the state. And I think that's going to be a much more powerful thing. The other thing of it, this primary, I did political polling as part of my job for the Milwaukee Journal. And one thing you never want to do is a poll about a primary that you don't know who is going to vote in it. There's no way of screening your polls in order to make them accurate as to who's going to go out and cast votes in a very low turnout primary. There are things going on around the state locally. Waukesha County, there are a lot of Republican races in Waukesha County. Now, if that brings out a lot of voters in Waukesha County, does that help Scott Walker or not? Because, as a matter of fact, you know, a lot of those arch conservatives out in Waukesha County don't like career politicians, don't like, you know, the fact the Republican Party has anointed Scott Walker as a candidate. They are more likely to go to someone who is representing himself the way Mark Neumann is, as I'm the most conservative, and forget the fact that I was ever a congressman, I'm a businessman, and I'm non-government. I think it is like a toss-up. I think, you know, the Milwaukee Journal could be very surprised at how strong Mark Neumann is.
You've said before you think it's going to be closer than most people realize.
I do believe it's going to be closer, but I still give the edge to Walker for these two reasons. One, Walker has the ground troops and the enthusiasm of party activists,
right,
and those will make a difference. And the second is that while Neumann has spent an awful lot of money on television ads, radio ads, and I believe that they'll prove to be effective to a degree, what will really matter is talk radio, and talk radio has bashed Neumann in favor of Scott Walker, and as a result, Walker's going to come out of this with the
Republican Party activists all over the country have gotten beaten by these off-the-wall candidates who are
they don't have talk radio. They don't have talk radio locally as a factor the way we have here in southeastern Wisconsin.
You're giving too much credit to those guys.
Too much emphasis on southeastern Wisconsin.
Right.
I think the rest of the state is going to make the decision on what happens here, and I think the rest of the state is going to tip in the balance of Neumann.
And if Denise and Joel are puffing up Mark Neumann the way they are tonight, that means they're scared of Scott Walker.
No, not at all. I think he would be a stronger.
I hope he doesn't get the nomination.
I absolutely agree with you. Strong candidate.
Harley-Davidson said today that it may well move its manufacturing operations out of Milwaukee and completely and into Kansas City if the ongoing negotiations with its labor unions here don't lead to the cost-saving numbers that Harley said it wants. Is Harley bluffing or playing hardball and just being upfront and honest?
No, I think that they're being upfront and honest. Part of what I think they took a look at and are calculating in all of this is what did happen in the Mercury Marine situation and what they have come back to the well to ask for on previous occasions. They've tried to get concessions out of their workers. They're realizing that the product that they've got to sell isn't selling as well as they need it to sell because of the economy. They've got to make some type of adjustments in their cost. And I won't say the easiest way, but the surest way to extract some of those costs, given that they're losing money, is to go back to the workforce and get some of the concessions from there. So I don't think that this is a bluff on their part. I think they're very sincere. If the company is going to stay alive as a manufacturing entity in Milwaukee, they're going to have to at least make those costs comparable to what they would be in other parts of the United States or what they would be able to get if they outsourced it.
But Kevin, Milwaukee area unions don't have a big, strong history of give-backs.
Giving back, you know,
dramatic wage cuts.
Cut their nose off to spite their face and not take concessions. I agree with I agree with Gerard that I think this is an option that they have to keep on the table because they're in trouble. They had a horrendous fourth quarter of last year. They have rebounded since the beginning of this year, but the growth that they have seen is very minor and not enough to satisfy the CEOs and the stockholders. The stock's gone down 60% in the last 3 years. Their shipments are way down. Worldwide sales of motorcycles are down, and that's understandable. A motorcycle is about the cost of a small car or even more expensive than that. People aren't buying small cars in this economy, and they're certainly not buying motorcycles. So I believe that the company is being honest, and they have to be. But I think shareholders have to ask themselves the question, even would a small reduction in labor costs be enough to yield a better return on their investment and cause stock prices to go up? And think about that dynamic about the expense of motorcycles. Even if you move some of your production to a place like Kansas City or Kentucky or Texas or whatever, that doesn't change the fact that the economy is terrible and people are not buying motorcycles because they can't afford them. So I believe they're looking at locales outside Wisconsin. They should be, for the very sake of economic survival, but I don't think it's a given that they're leaving.
So what do you do if you're the union and they say, we want you to cut your wages?
You don't race to the bottom, and that's what Kevin would have them all do. Just give them whatever they want, and, or they're going to threaten to leave.
I didn't say that.
And the truth of the matter is that Harley-Davidson is a very unusual company, and for the most part, you could say almost any company in the United States could move their operations anywhere, or to another country. But Harley-Davidson has this culture associated with it. It is, through the Harley Owners Group, through their rallies, whether they're here in Milwaukee, every 5 or 10 years, or Sturgis, South Dakota, or wherever. They just opened the Harley-Davidson Museum in Milwaukee, and this is a mecca for Harley owners all over the nation to come to. I think they're bluffing more than not in this case. I do think they're definitely going to go for major concessions, and they will squeeze every sweat out of that union. You know that they will. They're doing that to unions all over the country. Industries are. But the truth of the matter is, I think it is in their interest to stay here in Milwaukee strongly. This is the mecca for the Harley owners, and I don't think they can escape that. They created it, and I think that's part of their culture.
Isn't it interesting, though, Denise, that they haven't made any demands from Wisconsin or from Milwaukee like Mercury Marine did?
Not yet.
It is, not yet, and I think they're trying to stay away from that.
Right.
And I think the other thing that they know is going to happen is that it's going to be a lot harder to go hat in hand, if that's in fact what Harley eventually has to do, to the state or to the city, if you haven't had some kind of concessions from the union. The reality of it is, I agree with Gerard. I don't think they're bluffing. I think they're being very honest about it. It puts workers between a rock and a hard place. Do they want to take these concessions to try to be able to keep their jobs? And I think that's really what it boils down to. I think they'll keep that headquarters and figurehead here if there aren't the concessions that they feel that they need to be able to remain competitive and to keep the plant here. But workers are between a rock and a hard place, just as workers are around the country. Are you going to take the concessions and still have a job, or not accept the concessions and risk losing everything? As hard as it would be for those workers to take the concessions, it's going to be a lot harder for them if these jobs leave, because that's 2,000 jobs. And, you know, we're not creating 2,000 jobs a month or a week here in the greater Milwaukee area. I think as hard as it has to be, in order, not for the company, but for these workers themselves, they may have to go ahead and bite the bullet and take those concessions.
They want to make a decision in the next month or so.
Yeah.
Plus, who would you go to? You got a lame duck governor. You got a legislature that may flip.
It's not in session.
And there's no
Not in
money.
session
And there's no money.
That little
They've
problem.
still been talking about tax relief, and so it'll be interesting to see just what do they lay on the table for government.
It'd be a tough sell to the legislature. The legislature helped out Midwest Express, and look what happened there.
And it still folded.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, next topic. This week, a federal judge halted federal funding of all research involving embryonic stem cells, putting the brakes on one of President Obama's scientific priorities. It also puts into jeopardy millions of dollars of research projects at UW-Madison and the Medical College of Wisconsin. Is this like the abortion issue, something that's just never going to go away? They're going to fight it about it, administration after administration after administration.
Well, I happen to have been on the Board of Regents when stem cell research was pioneered at the University of Wisconsin at Madison. It was one of the proudest moments that I'd had on the board. I believe it's also one of the signature bits of research that's come out of Wisconsin, out of any of our institutions. And so I think what you're going to see is certainly a strong press on the part of the UW-Madison campus to engage in this fight to keep this stem cell research program alive. They have proprietary interest in some of the existing stem cell lines. Those so far have not been affected by the judge's order. But you will see a long fight in this whole process, because there are a number of high-tech universities that are involved in this. The University of California system, the privates like Harvard University that are involved in all of this. So it's going to be an expensive, long-term fight. I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if this is something that reached to the Supreme Court as well, because of the definition of federal law that has to be resolved in order for this kind of program to continue.
Kevin, is it like the pro-life issue?
It really is. It's very, 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 almost identical. You have the judge reaffirming the law of the land that Congress imposed back in 1996, that federal funding cannot be used for stem cell research that destroys human embryos. And I understand the supporters of embryonic stem cell research. They see hope and potential to find cures for debilitating diseases. I understand that, but does the end justify the means? I don't think it does, especially when embryonic stem cell research, unfortunately, has not yielded any treatments for human diseases. Adult stem cell research has been far more promising. And I think the public sides with not using federal dollars, federal tax dollars, to destroy human life.
Is it dangerous?
No, the public doesn't side with that. The public overwhelmingly supports stem cell research. Republicans and Democrats in Congress overwhelmingly support stem cell research. The this scientific future that stem cell represents for the diseases that have created tragedies in all of our families. Every one of our families. There's hardly a disease you can mention that will be untouched by this research. And the fact that a single, federal judge, and you rail against federal judges every once in a while.
Activist judges.
Activist judges.
This one just reaffirmed
not only undoes, President Obama's initiatives, and undoes the very limited initiatives of President Bush. And Tommy Thompson when he was the head of Health and Human Services. The fact of the matter is this decision is bizarre. It tries to, in fact, take power away from the President of the United States
It
that every
reinforces current law.
single president has had. You can't pass a law that takes power away from the President of the United States that is endowed in that office.
Is it dangerous to let judges and politicians get involved in scientific things
Yes.
like this, or is that exactly
Yes.
what
Sure
they're-
it is.
or is
It
it
is.
exactly what they are
It's a
supposed
legal
to do?
No,
issue.
it is dangerous for them to become involved in these scientific issues because, I think what tends to happen with, and I'll say politicians certainly more so than judges because we like to believe that justice is blind and not influenced by politics. We like to believe that.
really?
We'd like to believe it. But politicians oftentimes are focused on what does this mean to me as a politician? What does it mean to me in terms of being elected again? What does it mean to me in terms of what my constituents think? And the problem is, particularly when it comes to something as complicated and complex as stem cells, we as individuals don't always have that base knowledge that scientists have. I think what we need to do is to be able to take a look at how we can develop very progressive, very reasonable ways to approach the issue of how we cure some of these diseases.
I agree
To
with-
me,
I
think
agree
stem
without
cells- let me
discarding
finish,
human
please.
life in the
Let me
garbage.
finish, please. I think, and it's not being discarded in the garbage,
absolutely
Kevin.
is not.
This
Destroying
is-
human embryos?
No.
It is.
Excuse
Not an
me?
embryo that's never going to become alive.
It is a case where it's easy to say, let's throw this in the garbage. That's fine. Then let's also say we're willing to let people who are suffering from cancer, Parkinson's, MS, we're willing to throw their lives in the garbage as well. The bottom line of this is that stem cell research has the potential to be what vaccines that stopped polio,
And that's what I
whooping
said,
cough,
potential,
and
but it has not
diphtheria.
proven itself,
Let me
Denise.
finish. Let me finish,
has not
because I did
proven
not
itself.
interrupt you, so don't interrupt me.
Well, you're making a
It
mistake.
has been a case. I'm not. You disagree with it. That doesn't make it wrong. What I do
point
want to be
out
able to
one
say is that
development in
these are
science
going to
that,
be. These are
that-
going to be.
You can't.
I'll just. I'm going to keep going till you let me finish, and I understand why you don't want me to finish because there's some facts
You
behind it.
constantly interrupt me on this
This is
show.
a case where we're taking a look at stem cell research having the potential to cure diseases the same way that vaccines did at the turn of the last century. And there were people at the turn of the last century who said, well, we don't know if we want these live vaccines going into people. What's going to happen? The reality of this is that this is a new opportunity for us to do something that makes a significant difference and improvement in the lives of millions and millions
Are you
of
done now?
people.
I don't want to
And we need to be
interrupt.
able to do that. We've already done it before. I don't know why you'd stop now.
Denise, Joel, they cannot name one development that we have seen from human embryonic stem cell research
This research
that
has
has
not been
yielded
allowed to go
any
forward.
treatment that can be used to help people with debilitating diseases. There's hope. There's potential, but until we actually see some results, I'm not about to risk human life by tossing it in the trash.
We can't see results
I have
because the
more
stem cell
regard,
lines have
and
not
I
been able
believe
to
you
go
do too, my
forward.
friend, for human life than my two colleagues at that end
That
of
is
the
a
right.
bunch of hooey,
The
and I won't let
embryos
you
in
say that
research-
because that's
the embryos in
absolutely not
research
true.
will be
That
tossed
is
in the
not
garbage.
Can't
true,
point to
Kevin.
one success
Because
from
the
human
research has
embryonic
not
stem
been
cell
allowed to
research.
go forward.
All you can
Don't
say
sit
is
up here
there's
and
hope
say-
and there's potential, and we might be able to make blind people see and people in wheelchairs walk someday if only we kill off more human embryos.
Please do
Argue
not.
for ignorance.
Please do not say that because I don't agree with you, I don't have respect for human life. That's not true, and I'm not going to sit there and let you stand
Well,
it.
if you're willing,
you don't.
if you're
You don't, and I'm
willing,
not going to let you
if
say
you're
that.
willing to
That's it.
trample on human embryos, I would say that's a disregard for
no
human
I
life.
guess you're willing to trample
For my
on the
human
millions
life,
of people
among
with
others.
cancer and other diseases.
All right, we move on. We have to touch real quickly on the fact that they unveiled the statue of Bud Selig this week. Good idea, bad idea, yes or no?
Normally, you reserve these things for people who are dead or who gave a lot of money. I make an exception here because I think it's worthy. Without Bud Selig, you don't have baseball in Milwaukee, and he's contributed his whole adult life to baseball and for the good of baseball. I think it's fine.
Yes or no?
Ditto. Yes.
Miller Park wouldn't be here without him. The new owner paid for it. What's the point? We wouldn't have baseball. He's the commissioner of baseball. He's risen to the highest position in baseball from Milwaukee. Of course he should have a statue.
Denise?
I love Bud. Good statute.
All right.
But you don't think so, do you?
You know,
Dan?
August is typically a slow news month, but not this year, not at all. The airwaves seem to be filled with one big story after another. Of course, that could depend on whose airwaves you're watching. Here's Rick Horowitz.
You heard the news, right? You must have heard it. It's all over TV. Contaminated Muslim eggs at ground zero. Islamic salmonella, they're calling it. And you can absolutely see why it's got people so worried. I mean, what's more American than eggs? This country was built on eggs. And the whole idea that foreign chickens, terrorist chickens, could infiltrate themselves into our food supply and drop their eggs on such hallowed ground? No way. That's what people are saying. No way. And they're not just saying it, they're shouting it. They're even having demonstrations about it with signs. Once certain cable channels started blowing the whistle, that is, while the mainstream media was still ignoring it. Just look at the words salmonella, S-A-L-M, and Islamic in the middle, S-A-L-M. Well, S-L-A-M, but close enough. And then the I at the front of Islamic, which means I'm going to destroy you. And at the end, I see chickens in your streets. It's all perfectly obvious. Salmonella's a secret Muslim weapon of mass diarrhea. And then to hear how there are all these diners and luncheonettes in New York right near the hallowed ground, and how they've been serving these contaminated Muslim eggs for months. Of course people are upset, and not just their stomachs, but it's all part of the plot. See, if people get scared about eggs, they'll stop ordering meals that are made with eggs. And what are some of the favorite meals made with eggs? Bacon and eggs, ham and eggs, sausage and eggs. And what religion totally forbids eating things like bacon and ham and sausage? Exactly. See how it all fits together? And here's the worst part. The conspiracy goes straight to the White House, to the Oval Office. I didn't believe it either until certain cable channels played the smoking gun, the Muslim chickens themselves, on videotape. Yeah. Do you ever hear chickens squawking? Bark, 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 bark. That's what I thought too. But what if they're really saying Barack, 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 Barack? That changes everything, doesn't it? How much more proof do you need? Contaminated Muslim terrorist chickens chanting the name of their secret human leader, the plotter-in-chief. Thank goodness certain cable channels are onto him. I mean, talk about having Fox in the hen house.
Thanks, Rick. Have a nice weekend, everyone.